Hello, back again. And we're going to look at the Battle of Vicksburg and put Grant center stage. Before we get to Vicksburg, though, I want to show you something. This is a lithograph. This is a drawing of a battle that took place same time as Gettysburg and Vicksburg. It's called the Battle of Fort Wagner down in South Carolina. And the Battle of Fort Wagner is made famous because of what's known as the Massachusetts 54th Regiment. That regiment, the movie, if you've seen it or if you haven't seen it, you should see it as a movie called Glory. It's got a very young Denzel Washington, a young Matthew Broderick. It's a really stellar movie. It's got some inaccuracies, but it's still worth it. And the use of black troops, because where we last left off, we left off with Gettysburg. And we left off with Lincoln's Gettysburg Address and what did it mean about this new birth of nation, this new birth of freedom, excuse me, and what the nation was really about. It is now this transitory point, it's this position in 1863, that you begin to see that the war has been widened. Remember, we talked about at the beginning of war aim shifting, and this is definitely true. And this does deal with Grant. On the back of this, I'm going to send it to you. I should have already sent it to you. Is a letter. It was a letter from a woman named Hannah Johnson out of Buffalo, New York. Her son fought in the Battle of Fort Wagner, and she had a wonderful line. And I don't want to read the whole thing to you; it's a lot. But she mentioned about the use of African Americans in war, and she said to Lincoln, "This is a letter she wrote to Lincoln. They tell me some do. You will take back the proclamation." She says, "Don't do it. When you are dead and in heaven, 1,000 angels, okay, 1,000 angels, 1,000 years, that action of yours will make the angels sing your praises. I know it. Ought one man to own another, law for or not? Who made the law? Surely the poor slave did not." And so, in the middle of this war now, to save the nation, as Lincoln said in the Gettysburg Address 5 times, this is now the idea. It's to make the nation as it should have been, Lincoln would argue, as it should have been and could be. A nation that those principles of 1776, fourscore, 7 years ago, would be true. And so this began this process. Now, why I'm bringing this up is now Grant's out in Vicksburg, and Grant's going to use black troops. And you're going to find this as Grant's going to be brought back east to face Lee. But first, let's go to, and before I get into this, I promised some books. This is the book I'd get. This is called Hallowed Ground by James Mcpherson. He is the professor, the writer on the Civil War. Not the only one, but a very good one, obviously. He walks you really through the battlefield. It's worth its weight in gold. Here comes Christmas. You're shopping early. Avoid shop apocalypse or whatever it's going to be called. And then the Mighty Scourge. Yes, James Mcpherson again. He just keeps hammering these books out. There's other historians and other authors, but this is the one because it covers so much from the beginning to the end. But it's well written. It's not just battle after battle. It's a lot more thought provoking than that. Just a military analysis alone. Anyway, sorry. So let me get back to Vicksburg. In Vicksburg, the map of the day is this one. I have some writing down there. This is what I give to you students, so you can think about it and understand it a little bit, contemplate some things. Vicksburg's a long, long siege. It began really effectively in March. This is going to be 1863. Vicksburg is an impregnable city. It's a city that can't be taken. It sits on a bluff. It's high up. Very defensible. And the key to taking the Mississippi River, which is really Grant's objective and mission, you had to take Vicksburg. And Vicksburg then is a problem that began in March, really, and it's going to go all the way till July. Same exact time that Gettysburg went on, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, is the same time Gettysburg went on, and the same time you get Fort Wagner. And so all three of those kind of come together in my mind to manifest this one huge point about the Civil War. But now Lincoln's going to find his man. He's going to find Grant. And Vicksburg's going to prove, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that Grant's the guy. Grant's a Lincoln member is exasperated. He's upset. He wants to get Lee even after Gettysburg. Meade still didn't follow up. That term keeps being used. Lee's army's intact as long as Lee's army's out there. Lincoln is very clear that the war is going to continue. It is not the objective of just capture capitals. It is now the objective of you must destroy the enemy's army. And so Grant's going to prove this to be very effective. The taking of Vicksburg is no small feat. It's absolutely unbelievable. What Grant's going to finally do, as he realizes he can't get at Vicksburg, Grant had several problems. There's 7 specific. You want to get into this. You see every type of warfare. Vicksburg today, if you drive there, is beautiful. The Vicksburg Cemetery, once again, I highly suggest you go see it. Vicksburg is not the same today as it was in 1863. Vicksburg had huge, numerous amounts of swamps, bayous. It's jungle-like, and it's got this thing called the Mississippi River. If you're not familiar, have ever seen the Mississippi River, go on YouTube or whatever and look at the Mississippi River. Just look at it. It's huge, it's wide, it's enormous. It is not a simple thing like the Pecos River here in New Mexico. You can just kind of jump across. It's not like an Antietam Creek. And so what's going to happen is Grant's going to face tremendous topographical challenges. And on top of that, he has a very determined enemy in a defensible city. So as Grant would sit on one side of the river and Vicksburg's on the other, Grant's in the west, Vicksburg's to the east, towards where you'd see Tennessee really. What's going to have Vicksburg's in Mississippi, but towards Tennessee's side. What Grant's going to have to do is he's going to have to go all the way around and go to the backside of Vicksburg to take it. By the time what Grant's going to do is something simply amazing. He's going to leave half of his men to face Vicksburg. He's going to take, Grant's got about 75,000 men. He's going to take the other half and he's going to take them around. He's going to cut himself off completely from communication, from supply lines, expose himself to the enemy completely where they can get him. And he's going to have the other thing, basically, besides cut off communication, is he has no hope for reinforcement once he did this. And it leads to one of the great lines, and this is why Grant's going to be the guy to beat Lee. This is where Lincoln's going to get really the attention. And Grant, this is big newspaper press too. It's really the idea of successful reward requires necessary risk. There's a word. Remember going back to the Peninsula Campaign. Lee was a massive risk taker. The initiative, the offensive. And Grant's going to be the mirrored image of this. But what Grant's going to do is use numbers. He's going to throw the numbers at the Confederates. One of the observers and one of the people who evaluated the war was a British general who had this great line, and he said, "What General Lee or what General Grant has pulled off is true to the maxim of war of hit hard, hit often, and keep hitting." This is great. If anything showed determination, it was Vicksburg. Like having to overcome all of these challenges. For heaven's sakes, Grant even had crews diverting the Mississippi River, building new canals. Because Grant's going to finally come to the conclusion you can only take it by the river. And so he's going to have to ferry up river boats in order to bring in batteries to begin to hit Vicksburg. You're going to begin to bombard the city. But Grant, meanwhile, has to go all the way around. He's going to engage. He's going to fight 4 different engagements in this trip. He's going to win every one of them. And then he's going to lose a total of about 4,300 men. He's going to inflict much more damage on the Confederates. And this is why I'm going to get this analysis when we bring Lee back or bring Grant back east to face Lee. Is Grant gets this nickname as the Butcher. And this is really something you got to be very careful with. The type of warfare, going back to the Peninsula Campaign, is Daniel Hill, a Confederate commander himself, said, it's not war, it's murder. You can take this and put it at each battle. It just doesn't end. For heaven's sakes, one of the great battles in Tennessee is the battle at Stones River between a guy named Rosecrans. Okay, Rosecrans, old Rosie, is a Union commander facing Braxton Bragg, who's the commander of the Confederates. And Rosecrans that's engagement is just absolutely murderous. So if you're going to say, well, Grant's a butcher, well, where do these other ones sit? And it has to do, if you look at it long enough, it's a continual theme of defensive positions that have to be taken by the onslaught of men. And what Grant, to me, in Vicksburg is, there is an opportunity. You can sit there and just, launch against this massive fortified city. This is suicide. That's not Grant. Grant is taking it, when you study Vicksburg, he's avoiding that. He avoided that. Okay, when Grant finally gets back and meets Lee, that hit hard, hit off, and keep hitting, that's Grant. Because Grant realized if you sit back, then the South gets what they want. If you sit back, these soldiers are not professional soldiers. They're veterans by now. But these are people who had been shopkeepers and farmers and so on like this. The goal is to get out of the war. You got to go through it. Okay, and this is it. This is the sense of it. Just like me one time when I was driving, I had to go through Dallas. I want to go around, and I go through it, and so yeah, the traffic and they always have the same 2, 3 lanes under construction. It's lifetime employment. So anyway, I'm sorry. Let me go back and track. So what Grant's going to do in the total sense of Vicksburg is it's absolutely essential for Vicksburg to be held on to. And Pemberton, a guy named Pemberton, is the commander of Vicksburg. He's a Pennsylvanian, and his brothers, 2 of his brothers, are in the Union. This is where you get the sense when you read about Vicksburg. It is a brothers' war. I mean, it just gets worse and worse and comical. So you go back to that Battle of Stones River. One of my favorite stories is on December 30th. It fought on New Year's Eve, basically. On December 30th, the two bands for the Union and the Confederates encamped each other about 100 yards or 200 yards away from each other. And they had the Battle of the Bands before they had the Battle of Stones River. The two bands played back and forth in Stones River. The Union band played, of course, Yankee Doodle. The Confederates responded with Dixie, and then they both kept battling back and forth. And then both sides ended up singing because they both knew these songs. And then they ended up finally, the last song was Home Sweet Home, not the Motley Crue one. This is different. Home Sweet Home, and they all sang this chorus. It reminded me of the World War One truce between the Brits and the Germans, that they all knew each other so well as far as their culture goes back. This is a unification in a way and an identity. But the common bottom line is, in the weirdness of the war, you're going to sing this, you're going to have this go on, and then the next day you're going to have this absolutely murderous fist fight. You're going to bloody it is brothers. There's only brothers could do this. Brothers can sit there and sing and chuckle and laugh, and then they beat the living daylights out of each other, and then they go back and they're brothers again. This is a weird war. It's a fun war. The one book I didn't bring, by the way, I wish you'd get, is Bruce Catton, Catton, one of the great Civil War historians, old but wonderful. It's called The Reflections of the Civil War. It's unfortunately in my office where I'm banned right now, and so because of the situation. Okay, so Vicksburg, Grant's going to take it. He's going to lose a total of 10,000 by the end of it. He's going to capture about 37,000 Confederates, and include 15 generals. He's going to take 172 of their cannon. He's going to take 60,000 of their rifles. And one historian said, "This is the greatest accomplishment in the space of time with such small loss." This is going to get big newspaper press. Lincoln's going to say, "Grant is my man. I am him the rest of the way." One other thing about Vicksburg, and I really want to get more into the battle itself, but I'm not going to try to overwhelm you with all kinds of statistics and data, however you want to spin it. Was this the most successful victory of the Civil War? Gettysburg outshines it. Gettysburg gets all the books and all the press. Gettysburg Address. There is no Vicksburg Address. It stands to wonder why. And if anything's on display, it's the exact style of warfare is all there in Vicksburg. Everything you want to study about the Civil War is in that one period of time, several months. Remember, March to July. And the determination of Grant's there, and that led Lincoln to say, "Grant is my man. I am for him the rest of the war." That also led to something I left off with Gettysburg. Remember at the very end, if you saw it, hopefully, is that there was this thing. Grant can't come in because he's an alcoholic. Do you realize the level of sobriety you need? That's what I'm saying. You get all these myths. Be very careful. The one thing that's true about Grant, he smoked a lot of cigars, and I'm not advocating that. And it's because the stress level. And Grant never started off smoking a lot of cigars. Just whenever all this newspaper press, people back east kept reading about this and found their man, and so they kept sending him these cigars, and so he'd smoke these cigars. There's a lot about Grant I can tell you. He's one of my heroes, and it's because of the type of person he was. He was courageous under command. Let me also say something about Grant. He couldn't stand the sight of blood. If you ever want to get into this, it was because of the job he had as a youth with his father. Was a tanner, and Grant couldn't stand the smell. In fact, from what I read, is if Grant got within the massive sights of blood, that he would actually get dizzy and at some points vomit. There is a point where Grant showed his humanity, his human side, his nature of very sensitivity to the war. And it's where after one battle against Lee, Grant went back and threw himself on his bed. They said he cried. The Civil War is personal. And, look, when you read it, you really read it, you read the letters, you see it, you feel it. War is war. It doesn't change. I don't care what year you want to put to it. It is a sense of war. You see the best and the worst all at once. And it is this atrocious nature of transformation of a person. It's unfortunate. And that's why I like that Robert Edward Lee quote. It is good that war is terrible. Otherwise, we will grow fond of it. Because there is an honorable sense, a sense of unity that people create as a soldier. These become your comrades, your brothers. They become your family, and it's a bond. But at the same time, it's just not really designed for the human mind or soul. So anyway, Grant's found. Grant's the guy. Lee's going to bring him, or Lincoln's going to bring him back to face Lee. And I can get a lot into this. And what's going to happen is the first battle is Battle of the Wilderness campaign. It's over in the Chancellorsville area again. It's a horrible, murderous fistfight once again. This is in May of 1864. Grant had overwhelming numbers. He's in the 100,000. Lee's down about 60,000. His army's been kind of mangled up a little bit. Lee's going to try to take the offensive in this case, but Grant is just going to continue to pound him. When Lincoln asked Grant, "What's your plan?" Grant simply said, "I intend to pin Lee down and chew his army to bits. Basically, I'm going to hit him, and continue this." Lincoln understood this would mean more blood, more death. But this is where we go back to the beginning of strategy and policy. Grant is the guy Lincoln needed. And likewise, Grant needed Lincoln. And now the objective is clear: to save the nation. And to Grant, one of the reasons he's one of my heroes is he was not racist. He was very much about inclusion. And you see this as Grant when Grant would later on become president. I'm very thankful for that, gentlemen, for the Republican Party of Lincoln and the Republican Party of Grant. Okay. And so that's, to me, the sense and the essence of the Gettysburg Address. Uh, okay. Anyway, you're going to see the use of African American troops. That's what Fort Wagner. That's why, if you ever watch Glory, I highly recommend it. You see at the end, that's the very sense and point to prove. And Grant, as he would inflict tremendous casualties on Lee. Now, Grant always had more casualties than Lee. But what I always tell my students, be careful with this. We say Grant lost 18,000 at this battle, Spotsylvania, but Lee lost only 11. Percentages. You cannot continue to lose it, and Grant could continue to be resupplied. He's gonna use the numbers. He's going to throw him at Lee, and he's going to continue to pound him until Lee says, "I've had enough." And this will lead us to the end of the war. And I don't want to get into it today. I'm sorry, but we'll get into Cold Harbor, where Grant is one of the worst of all engagements. And I give a lot of credit to my colleague, Dr. Richard Kitchen. We had a long conversation about Cold Harbor. He's a very well versed in that, in history in general, but in the Civil War. But you got to understand that represented the future war, about a lot of digging in, a lot of trench warfare, and trying to assault fortified lines. The Confederates are going to lose about 15,000. The Yankees are going to lose about 7,000. But it's going to just end up. The will to fight is very much on display, and that's what the Union had to exhibit. And they did under Grant. And so you begin to see this transformation of the war. And now, as Lee is hounded by Grant, Lee had a great line. He said, "I do not believe this man is concerned whether he loses his whole army." And Lee's now on the run. He's decided to move westward towards these mountains. Sitting there, this is the wonderful, beautiful Smoky Mountains. They're gorgeous. Blue Mountain Ridge. And it is there that Grant's going to continue to write letters to Lee, filling him out, saying, "Look, you're ready to surrender." Lee's going to write back. Lee is was deeply concerned about this surrender. But I got to get to that next time because I'm running on 20 minutes and I want to keep it there. And next time we'll look at the end of the war. It's one of the weirdest endings in history. And I'm going to recommend, once again, yes, another book. This is the book to get as well. Okay. You guys take care and think about this a little bit. Stay warm. It's going to get cold. And I miss you. Hopefully we'll see each other again soon. Right? Yes, we will. Okay. Thank you.